Greetings, everyone. This is Virtuous Roots, where we reclaim virtue to bring into our homes and yours. I'm Thomas Quackenbush.
And I'm Stacey McCuddy.
And I'm Nick Wiegand. And this conversation is going to be the significance of virtue of a faithful woman. And since everybody loves when men tell women how to be women, we're made sure we had Stacey here for this conversation. And really, I want to focus on it's easy in a lot of the podcasts and a lot of all of the man podcasts. Virtue is getting a small resurgence, but I think it's a little bit more difficult, through the eyes of a woman on where this is the most important. And so one thing that you had said to me before, Stacey, was you were talking through the idea of the difference between the legalistic side, just like doing the things for the sake of doing them, versus the heart issue, the hardest 18 inches that, hardest 18-inch barrier that you have to cross. And so kind of give me a kind of a warm up on what if a woman were to truly seek a virtuous life, how is that different than a pharisaical life?
I think, and this is true for men, I'm sure, but obviously I only have the experience of a woman, but we have all these different expectations of like culture says you have to be this to like be a woman, and the church tells you, you need to be this to be a woman. And, it feels like an impossible checklist of things to do and like an exhausting life. If you tried to like accomplish, like if you tried to combine all those things into one of what everybody tells you a woman should be or what you should be doing, it's impossible. And it's like you're defeated before you even start. But I think a lot of women do strive to be like, okay, well, I have to do this. I have to look a certain way. I have to feed my kids a certain way. I have to live in a certain house. I have to have a job and manage the kids at the same time. I have to, meet my husband's needs and, all of these things. And it's a constant swirling of, again, like expectations. And so it can feel very much of like, well, let me just do everything that everybody's expecting
just to get it done.
Like I did the dishes, I fed the kids, I washed the laundry, I, did all the things, but there's no joy in it. There's no sometimes maybe no love in it even. Like you're just doing the things because that's what some they told you that you had to do.
Sure. So when you add the virtue to that and you seek the virtue and it becomes a part of you, how does that change? Like all of a sudden you like doing the dishes?
I wouldn't say all of a sudden. It is definitely a process, where you have to come back from that vice of, just gritting your teeth and doing it because you have to. And then coming to that point where you view whatever task it is, as a way to bless your family and bless your home, a way to express love to your husband or love to your children, that completely changes the game. And then you want to do those things from a place of service. And it's not like, oh, there's another load of laundry to do, or I have to, go pick up the kids, or I have to, whatever the thing is, that is your dreaded thing that you have to do. It's no longer that you can do it from that place of love and service.
Okay. So one of the directions that when we start in the church start talking about, how does a woman be a woman? We always go to Proverbs 31. And we look at Proverbs 31, and you had just mentioned the list, if you look at everything, seems like too much. Personally, I think the Proverbs 31 woman, it's a hefty list just in and of itself.
Yeah, it is.
And it's not the just do what you're told, as some people think that the church teaches, and that's just not it at all. The expectations are enormous.
Yeah.
And so I would think that one of the main virtues that is taught through that and kind of what you just described is fortitude.
Yeah.
And so what's fortitude? Like give me the rundown on what fortitude is to even begin with.
Well, you're desiring the good even when it's hard.
Yeah.
And so, like, listening to Stacey, and I have a wife as well, and it's just a lot. Being a mom, being a wife, having the expectations that are all over, wherever she goes. My wife deals with the same thing. So it's hard work. and God has designed women in a certain way for them to, like, because even in Scripture it says that through childbearing, women will be saved through childbearing, and Timothy says, or Paul says it to Timothy, because the whole process of being a mom is a sanctifying process.
Absolutely.
And it's funny because this we're focusing on kind of feminine virtue, but as a husband, like, I want my wife to be successful. I want her to be sanctified and not be frustrated. Because if she's going through the tasks, like Stacey was mentioning, all these things with a bad attitude, she's not being sanctified. She's just getting frustrating and burned out.
So you're going to be the Holy Spirit to convict her of that?
Well, yeah, I could tell her.
No.
No. What it is like I have to, like, as a husband, create an environment for her to be successful, and listen to the cues. This is what comes with being married for so many years. You start really listening. This is what men need to hear. We need to start listening to our wives, and we want them to be successful. We want them to become virtuous, and we have to, as men, create an environment for them to be successful. So, because they're going to do it, because God, my wife, when she became a mom, like, all of a sudden she did, like, it's almost like miraculous things in my eyes, just being able to take care of a child and be exhausted and just get up, and where I'm just trying to, like, my eyes are still, like, just trying to get up at all, and she's up, breastfeeding or pumping or just in stride, and just something that she was, God has designed women to do. It just amazes me.
So one thing that he said that obviously struck a chord is this idea of motherhood being sanctifying. What is that like? Explain that to me.
That is, parenting in general, but I think a lot of the child rearing tends to fall on the mothers. I think we're moving in a direction in a culture where it's a little bit more balanced, but it still tends to fall primarily on the women. But it is like, let
me just make sure that's clear. Like, just in the natural, it is
sure,
like,
right.
In the natural, it falls on the woman because, like, the men cannot feed that child,
right?
Like, there are so many things that are specific.
Yeah.
So that naturally, that's the direction that it ought to go, but not completely. And
sure.
I'm not saying, like,
but motherhood as a sanctifying process, like, I never knew what my vices were until I became a parent. And I don't mean that in any sort of bad way. I don't mean like, oh, don't become a parent because you'll become a bad person. But like, it's just the parenting brought those things out in me. I never had to face anything where I had to have fortitude. Yeah. I never, those kinds of situations were never coming up. I had a job. I, was in ministry with my husband before we had kids and all those things, but there just never was that, like, consistent opportunity to grow in fortitude or grow in temperance or even prudent, some of those things. Like, having children brought those things out in me because it is a daily grind. And again, it's not a bad thing, but it is something you have to show up for constantly. There's never a break. You don't get to clock out. You don't get to, sometimes you might not even get to sleep, like, like he was saying, so it is that constant vocation or whatever you want to call it, that, so it brings out those things that I didn't know were in me before. And again, not to, like, just wallow in those things and, woe is me or anything like that, but it makes you recognize where those vices are that had never really been pushed on before until you you came into that parenting role, because you're meeting frustrations all the time, or you're meeting, thousands of decisions you have to make, in a day, just, being in the home and being a mother. And especially then when you add on more and more children, then, that just multiplies.
Well, the expectations get incredible.
Right.
They are so high.
You got human beings
and
completely
so
dependent on you.
You can choose to be frustrated. You can choose to just be like, well, woe is me. Nobody's helping me. This is terrible. Like, and kind of, take that martyr role, in motherhood. Or you can choose to let it sanctify you and to be like, okay, I'm encountering, an issue where I feel frustrated and it's going to come out as anger, and I'm going to maybe talk to my children more harshly than I would really desire to. Or maybe I am noticing that I'm punishing my children in a way that, maybe is not the most virtuous, or is not the reflecting the fruits of the Spirit the way that I want them to. So in those moments, you can choose the virtue, you can choose to be more Christ-like, or you can choose to continue in that vice. So it is a constant sanctifying process, because you just naturally are given those opportunities to grow as a human being, as a Christian.
And I think one of the things you said was you can choose to kind of wallow in it. And I think if you define motherhood and femininity in a whole from the cultural standpoint, I think a majority of that is focusing on the vices and actually pursuing the vices from the cultural standpoint, because I think they're opposite of what the Christian worldview would have you do.
And we have that idea of like, well, mommy needs her glass of wine, or mommy needs this, or mommy needs that to, like survive the day or whatever. Or you're just like counting down the hours till the kids are in bed, like, so you can just be done.
Well, I mean,
instead of,
you bring that up when you look at just the increase in like Xanax and all of these antidepressant drugs amongst mothers. That's pretty incredible. It's become something to survive,
right,
instead of something to enjoy.
Yeah, and to thrive in, and to take joy or even pleasure in. I think I will be super honest here. One thing that has, I guess, been a conviction of mine is that, we should delight in our children. They're gifts from the Lord. They're not like burdens to be endured. They're not annoyances. They're not little pests. Like they're human beings, made in the image of God. They're gifts. And like I said, we should delight in them. And that's something, like I said, that I've been convicted in, of just kind of being in that survival mode of just like, literally, like, how many hours is it until bedtime? And they just woke up 5 minutes ago. Yeah. And, just how do I even just make it through this day? And, like we were talking about in the last episode, being able to come to that point of wanting to be in that role of motherhood from a place of love and service and joy and peace and, all those fruits of the Spirit, and letting the Holy Spirit use that experience to sanctify you, other than just, it being just a drudgery and, why I can't, and it is hard. Motherhood is like the most selfless vocation that there is. You literally give up your own body to, to have these children and to feed them, if that's the path that you choose. That you're literally giving yourself, to the children, and, physically, emotionally, all those things. And, but we are naturally selfish beings. So that's one of the huge
just the flesh
sanctifying things in itself, is just learning how to be selfish and not being like, well, I need to go take a bubble bath, or I need to go, do this, or I need to go out with my friends. And all those are good things. But if you're using that as an escape of, I really just don't want to, I don't feel like momming today, or I don't feel like adulting today, or, whatever it is. Well, but people do say those things, because you haven't allowed the sanctification to happen. And that self is still,
it's an old man,
taking priority over the calling that God has placed on your life as a mother or a wife or a parent. Or even just as a Christian woman. If you're a single woman, there's still expectations on you of what it means to be a godly woman or a Christian woman, or, everybody has an opinion, about what you should or should not be doing. So it's not just about, motherhood.
One thing that you'd said is you can't clock out. And I know you're not saying this, but I just want to make sure that I think some guys would automatically get defensive. But you're not saying that, being the father is easy. Like there's a huge burden and responsibility on both sides. And that's kind of one of the things that you said was you wanted to prepare an environment so that your wife can succeed,
Yeah.
right? So this weekend, my daughter graduated from college, and she graduated valedictorian, which is a huge accomplishment, and it was amazing to see. Her fiance, they get married in about a month. Her fiance, at the beginning of their college experience, they were competing for who had the highest grades. And it was just like, when I say competing, I'm talking like who could get the 103 on the test versus the 105 on the test. And this competition drove them both to just do better.
Yeah.
And his parents were there, and she said, "Oh, I guess that competition was good." And I said, I was like, "Who would you not absolutely want a pairing that drives you both to
Yeah.
be better in everything that you do?"
Right.
And so I think this idea of the virtue, and I'm not trying to take away from the woman's role, but as a guy, and we're listening to this, I think what you said was our goal here is to help with an environment that allows our wives to be the most faithful and virtuous woman that she can
Yeah.
be. But now I want to kind of like step back from the motherhood side of it and ask about how does virtue affect the wife, like being a wife before the children?
I think it's the same concepts, that selfishness and, humility, all those things that, you have to lay those aside sometimes in a marriage relationship. And marriage is just as sanctifying as
Yeah.
parenting. That's one of my
You think
favorite.
so? You think that? I
Is it
got to know
not?
more. Well, I got to know more because
I mean, I think so.
okay,
I mean, maybe not as much, but it still is a sanctifying process.
okay,
One of my favorite authors, says that, marriage is not designed to make you happy. It's designed to make you holy.
Yep, that's true.
And you shouldn't be looking at that person for your happiness. But
Mhm.
again, you're in that situation of becoming more holy because you're in that relationship with another person. And again, you can't clock out of being married either.
Right.
You can't just say, oh, okay, well, I'm not married from 5 to 9 in the evenings or whatever. That's not
That
something
usually
you
leads
can.
to divorce.
Right,
If you
right.
clock out of the
It's-
marriage for a little
Yeah,
while.
It's
pretty
not
much.
something that you can, delegate to certain time
Yep.
periods of your life, or
Or to other
or
people.
certain
I mean,
hours of the day.
Sarah and Abram, she delegated it to someone else, and it did not fare
Yeah.
well.
Did
for
not
her.
go well for her.
Nope.
Right.
No. So it's again, it's a sanctifying process as well, and learning. I think it's super hard for women in our culture to have that virtuous place in their marriage because everything that we are programmed from, and I think it's even worse than when I was a little girl. I mean, everything is about girl power and
Yeah.
find your own strength, and I don't need a man, and I don't, I can do this on my own. I'm a strong woman, all these things. And I just really think that's not how God designed us to be.
No.
And it's just the messaging is just so strong though. And you talk about these like strong female leads in movies. That's all you hear. Or this book has a strong female, heroine or whatever. And sure, you need to be strong and like not be a like doormat, but
Right.
that's not the same thing.
Yeah.
And we're taught, like I said, from birth almost, that we don't need to depend on a man, and that is not how God designed women to function at all.
Well, Proverbs
And
31:11 is the heart of her husband trusts in her, and he'll have no lack of gain. Like that is not a doormat. That is
right,
that is a strong woman. That is like there. Like it's.
but a
Like, as you
strong
read through this, it's tough.
yeah, but a strong woman in the home, not a strong woman seeking her own
Like,
path or
Mhm.
her own like independence or her own like
Glory.
self-reliance or glory. Yeah, like we're not meant to be self-reliant people.
And-
I mean, that disorders our relationship with God, and it disorders our relationship with our husband, and then that trickles down to a disordered relationship with our children.
Before my salvation experience, my wife and I got saved within a month of each other because she saw the change in me, and then that convicted her, and God, worked in her life as
The
well.
Holy Spirit convicted her,
Yeah, obviously.
using you as a tool.
Yep,
Okay.
exactly.
Just
That's
wanna
what I
make
mean.
sure.
Yeah.
Just clarifying.
Yeah. He's using me as tool. But as our marriage before, and this is the distinction between what it was like prior to salvation, then becoming a Christian, was that we were like roommates.
Yeah.
That had benefits, you could say, or whatever. But and um, and we just basically brought the kids, and we just
You were married though?
Yeah, we're married. I was married.
So you were married.
Yes. But
Okay.
I mean, we didn't act like that. I mean, we're not like the same way I did as a Christian husband. It was like we all basically we remained individuals. We're trying our best not to become one flesh like the Bible talking. We just my wife had what she wanted to do with her career. I had what I wanted to do with my career, and our kids kind of bound us together in some way, and we just kind of passed them off to one another. But we didn't have any true, in intimacy in terms of like where we just like basked in each other and loved each other in that sort of way, self-sacrificially. It was just two individuals sharing a house with children, and it's almost like we're roommates. And then when Christ intervened, we became because the first focus that he put on me was to really pay attention to her and really grow in our marriage. Because he saw in the future, I'm going to, and like the pastoring role I'm going to have, and he's preparing me for that. And I can't have that pastoring role without having my household ordered in a proper way. We started really coming together and trusting one another and depending on each other, where we didn't have that sort of like relationship before.
And your marriage became ordered.
It became
according
ordered
to what God's will and desire was.
And so when I was saying before, like instead of like now we have, because Stacey's saying operating the way it was, like my marriage was eventually going to split, because we're not coming together in the way we were supposed to as husband and wife. We were just two individuals. When we brought us together, we saw the complement that we have, and I realized that as a man, you go out and you make a living and you bring it, and you provide a safe environment for your wife and your children, as a protector, as a provider.
We're going to talk about the men on a different
episode. But what I'm saying is so this is the idea where the woman comes in. It's like I see her taking what the man provides and beautifying it and bringing beauty and to the home. And because if you see a single guy without a wife, it's just we're pretty much very Spartan. We're just kind of like, we put cinder blocks and put our TV on it. That's all we care about. A wife comes and she brings beauty into the home, and
I agree that is a portion of it, but that is far more deep than that, right? They bring so much more to the table than
it's
a good interior decorator.
But I'm not just saying that. I mean, that I know it's more than that, but beauty in general, just like bringing beauty to the home, bringing that, just what we lack as men by ourselves. It's not good for man to be alone. Women bring
so we complement each other.
Yeah, we
brings it to the table.
A woman can make a house a home.
Yeah, that's better.
Which is so much more deep than just I'm with you.
I'm just using it was just an example. I had to do a talk into a group of women about this, and I was like trying to figure out exactly how And one of the things I realized is Thomas and I were in South Africa staying at a single guy's house, and it was the most like barren apartment I've ever been in. There was no decoration whatsoever. And I'm like thinking about it. I'm like, this guy doesn't have a wife. And like, you can tell that he doesn't have a wife because that doesn't have that home feel to it.
But it's more than just the home.
It's more than just that.
So much deeper. And that virtue, as you seek that virtue, just as a man would, but as you seek that virtue, it makes you better serve each and every role God has for you. Mm-hmm. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
That's where you were going.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think we have like a few seconds, women in our culture as a whole are incredibly dissatisfied and unhappy because they're seeking what culture tells them, is the virtuous woman instead of what God prescribes as the virtuous woman. And then sometimes they come to that conclusion too late, and they've chosen not to be married and not to have children, and it's that deception is found out
far too late
sometimes, and it's sad that that's where Satan has broken apart God's design in that way.
Well, on that note, I appreciate the conversation. You can find us on familiesofvirtue.com, our podcast, Virtuous Roots, on all major streaming platforms. Be blessed, and we'll talk to you next time.